Hey gang, welcome back to Inverted Pursuits Laboratory. So we're actually going to be doing a series of videos here on the egg timer Eggfinder equipment. So I have purchased the Eggfinder LCD. This is actually the packaging it comes in. The Eggfinder LCD GPS module, as well as an Eggfinder Mini that I'm going to be using in some of my rockets. So we're going to do a series of about 4 videos on the Eggfinder. One where I build each of these pieces, and then one where we integrate and test it. So I have also printed off this Eggfinder tracker holder thing. It's meant to hold 2 Eggfinder LCD screens, one with the voice module, one with the GPS module installed. I've modified it so that this one has my T3 tracker from MissileWorks in it. And I've got some power switch modifications to it because I didn't like click button switches that could be bumped so easily. So I've got slide switches with some shields on them. But we're going to integrate it into this, and then I'm going to show you how it functions with the backlight program and power all on here, as well as how it can lead me to my rocket by putting the Eggfinder Mini out in my yard somewhere, and then we're going to go hunt it down. So that'll be part 4 of this video series. And so to get started, we're going to go ahead and start with the Eggfinder LCD itself. All right, so I have 2 assembly manuals here. One's actually the Quark assembly manual, which we'll get to in a later video, but I wanted to show you quickly why I don't have a paper copy of the Eggfinder LCD one, and that's just because this was like 40 pages, and the Eggfinder LCD one is 33 pages, and I think this was 38. Either way, I don't need a paper copy of this. Like, here's the user guide for the Quark. Like, okay, I did those by accident. I'm reading the rest off the computer, so like if I just pause and disappear for a moment, it's because I'm reading the instructions behind me on my computer. But when we open up the kit, first thing we find is the Eggfinder LCD parts list. We've got better lighting. We've got the full parts list here, so this is meant to let you check everything that is in your kit and go down one by one and check it all off. So we'll do that in short. I may not dig as thoroughly as I should, but we're gonna check everything. So this is the package it comes in. It's just a nice little mailing envelope, which I really like. You'll get a pink melted bag that has most of your parts in it. You have another bag that holds the LCD. You have about 3 foot of very fine low temp wire, and you have a push button. So this falls under one of the loose items. This is push button with leads, coil of solder wire. These are the last 2 items on your list. Small edge connector. The display. I think the antenna they're talking about is the one that I've got in the box down here that I didn't pull out. Let me dig that out. So this antenna, I've got one of these that you'll mount up, but I'll get that out of the way for the moment because we don't really need it at this exact moment. But we're going to go through every single one of these bags and check to make sure that we've got everything we need. So I'm going to use an X-Acto knife to open all these bags. If you're a young individual, please have adult supervision when using an X-Acto knife. Like, it's very important. All right, got a very fancy little chipboard. I forget what that is. I believe that is processor of some sort. I'd have to check the instructions again. I've read through them, I just don't remember the names of everything. You got a little circuit board. This is the Atmega 328P-PU. This is the processor. Okay. I'm gonna guess that's the RF module. Maybe. Not sure. Names of components are not my strong suit. Reading's not my strong suit for that matter. But we then get the remainder of our components out. We've got several headers here of varying styles, a little tunable pot, some voltage regulators. So these voltage regulators in particular, they've mentioned, are very important to keep track of what's what, so you don't mix things up. So one is labeled with a 3.3, and that is your 3.3 volt. The other is labeled with 5, that is your 5 volt. I'm not seeing much labeling on these, which is always fun. There you go, 5. So that's my 5 volt. That makes this other guy my 3 volt. We have a little, I assume this is a buzzer. Probably should have read. Yep, 12 millimeter round piezo buzzer. This is a pot of some sort. These are the 16-pin header and socket. Oh, this is a trimmed potentiometer. Very specific. We have a 3-pin right angle and 2 3-pin right angles. We have a 4-pin right angle. We have, I believe this is a capacitor. It's a little hard when some of these things are small and I can't read very well. This would be reading down everything is fun. I believe this is our RPSMA edge connector. So that actually goes right here on the board, this edge connector spot. Worked with those some in college. One good way to know what some things are when you cannot read what they are is quantities. So I know I'm going to have 2 of one little tiny thing, 2 of another, and 1 of another. So I can quickly look at this and go, oh, and like, here's a bunch more that I hadn't realized were underneath the circuit board. So we'll set the circuit board off to the side here. So determining these is going to be the hardest part. And that's just going to be what it is. This is the resonator. That's what that is. That's the resonator. We'll set that to the side. So I got a 102 and I got a 103 here. I got 4 of these 103s. That's not very helpful. The 103s, they actually say marked 103. Okay, so that is a 10 kilo ohm, 1206 size resistor. The marked 102 is a 1 kilo ohm, 1206 size resistor. That's very helpful. The brown in paper tape, okay, paper tape in plastic tape, and plastic tape with red stripe. So plastic tape with red stripe, they actually really labeled these quite well. This is a 22 microfarad 1206 size capacitor. The plastic tape here is a 10 microfarad 1206 size capacitor, and the paper tape is a 0.1 microfarad 1206 size capacitor. So starting with where the instructions say, now that we have organized everything. Oh, the only thing we haven't gotten out is the LCD display. Let's go ahead and pop that out of its little baggie and be very careful with it. So what we're going to do is actually just take the LCD display and set it up here, just out of our workspace. So now we've got everything laid out, and we're able to keep track of everything very well. Organizing isn't necessarily something you have to do. It's highly recommended by both Eggtimer and myself. I actually recently bought this cutting mat. If you noticed from the intro, the cutting mat doesn't exist in the intro of this video. but I really love it. It's got all these little squares and I can organize everything in it. The OCD part of my brain is really loving this. So I have had a soldering iron heating up over here off to the side that I'm going to quickly tin. Oof. I wish I had a better ESD setup at the moment, and I probably will for future videos, but at the moment, this is as good as my ESD setup gets. All right, so I'm grounded roughly to some electronics, and I just have to be careful with rolling. So the first thing we're gonna actually do is mount the 5-volt voltage regulator. It's the marking that ends with a 5, and I mentioned that earlier. So we will actually start on our circuit board. So we're gonna do a little bit of reorganizing here. So we'll move our resistors up and capacitors so that we can keep all of that very organized. We'll also put our resonator up here. We'll go ahead and move some things up just to get them out of the way a little more. Yeah, we'll leave that there. All right, so we're looking at this and we're looking for the thing that says 5 volts next to it. So that's this right here. And I'm not actually certain how visible that is. I might pull you guys in just a little bit closer as we're now working through this. All right, so we've got this 5-volt spot here. This is where the 5-volt regulator needs to go. So again, you double check it's the one that ends in a 5. We'll go ahead and open this thing real quick. I forget how these pick and place parts work sometimes. So small pair of tweezers or needle noses are very much recommended. All right, so if you look at this part right now, you can see on the end here, this number is a 5. You may not actually be able to see it. Focusing is kind of hard for this, but that last number is a 5. So what we'll actually be doing, I'm gonna go ahead and set it back down in its case, is we're gonna tin this large pad here with just enough solder to cover it. And then we are going to place the part onto it and melt it on there. So what we're doing is just gently coming in, heating this up. There we can see the solder starts to flow onto the pad, and there's just enough to cover the pad. So now if I come in with my part, oop, flipped it upside down, that's not what I wanted to do. Come in with my part. We line it up, apply gentle pressure. And I have my soldering iron set to 200 degrees C. That's as low as this particular one goes. 180 C is really all that's needed for what we're doing here. Also, transferring through such a tiny tip takes a little more time than what I'm used to, so. They recommended I use a fine tip. Of course, now the solder on the pad's not going to melt. Oh no, don't do that to me. Bad. I know picking up the part's not much better. Now we're causing all sorts of problems. Okay. And now we're having all the real fun. Ooh. The soldering iron is actually getting really hot today, which is kind of weird. It's not supposed to be this hot. I am not having as much luck as I usually do with this kind of stuff. Let's try a different set of tweezers. Maybe I'll have better luck with those. There we go. I'm gonna add a little bit of extra solder just to get it up and on there. All right, so now if you actually look at it, the solder has just come over that pad. If you gently grab with the tweezers, it does not come off anymore. Next thing we're gonna do is actually solder down the 3 tabs on the opposing side. So come in here and heat up for a moment. Perfect. And it gently domes up on there. The first one didn't go quite as well as I would have liked, but I will accept it. It's not my favorite when, so I'll try and show you this. This one actually has a little too much solder on it. I don't have a solder sucker immediately on hand, so I'm not gonna fight it, but it's not my favorite when, let's retin the tip real quick. I also like to keep the tip of my soldering iron tinned. So, tin keeps your soldering iron from oxidizing. So, now we want to mount the 2 microfarad capacitors next to the 5 volts regulator. Okay. So, let me steal this real quick. 16 by 2. We're mounting the ones above and below. All right. So, right here we can see text that says 10 microfarad and 10 microfarad. So it's this pad set and this pad set. So the 10 microfarad capacitor is brown in plastic tape. So that would be these guys. Brown in plastic tape. So those are brown in paper tape. That's brown in plastic tape with red stripes. So brown in plastic tape. So we're gonna go ahead and peel this back real quick, and maybe I can get it better with the tweezers. This work is so much easier to do when you're not in a clean room. I've dealt with stuff like this before for work, and 90% of the time we are in a clean room environment doing this type of stuff, and it is just not as much fun. Okay, I'm gonna gently dump those 2 guys out on there. Let me remind myself specifically of any instructions. There are no specific instructions. That is what I like to hear. So the way we're actually going to go about this is I am going to tin the pads and then heat it up and set them on there. So we're going to come in here real quick, heat up the pad. Here we go. Do a little blob of solder. Alright, we're going to turn the pad on all of them real quick. The 10 microfarad capacitor. I'm going to take my capacitor and simply heat up the pad and set my dude down. Whoa, hello buddy. I want to just set my dude down on there. Maybe not have liked the whole heat up the pad process. Yeah, it didn't quite go the way I'm used to. I'll just be what it is for this one though. It's not a big deal. Okay, it is melted on there. I'm actually going to go ahead and on this side I'm going to heat up, remelt, and add a little bit extra solder in there. Just to ensure, just because it kind of got off left right more than I wanted it to, so alright, this one's going a little bit better. Not by much, but it's going better. Just a smidge more solder in there. Alright, there we go. Those are not as surface mount as I would like them to be. A reflow soldering gun would do a lot for that particular capacitor. Thankfully, this one is a ground station side board, which is why I'm starting with it. So, ground station side board means I have no need for specific shock environment to survive. So, the next one we're putting on is the 22 microfarad, which is that little guy. And he goes where it says 22 microfarad, which is right here. So we're actually going to do this one different than what I just did the last one. And I'll probably have to get hold of a reflow gun. So that would make this a lot easier. Especially for the quantum, the quark, and the, well, maybe the TX. This process goes better. I'll use this mostly going forward on things. Alright, let's drop that guy out. Alright, we're going to pick this little guy up. We're going to set him on the board. We're going to just gently heat up and then solder the capacitor in place. So this is probably going to be a little hard to see, and I understand. All right, that actually went a lot better. So we're probably going to start with tinning exactly one side. Oop. quick look at that board. Make sure there's enough solder holding those connections on. Yes, there is. That's what I like to see. All right. I know I'm checking everything. Now we mount the 3.3 volt regulator. This is pretty much the only one left. It's the exact same process as the first one we did. So we start with this little guy, which we're not going to pop him out of his container yet. We want to place solder. The 3.3 volt goes on this pad right here. It's the one right below where we've been doing all of our work so far. So we're going to just heat this pad up. There it goes. Now I've got some movement on there. Now we're going to come in, grab our board, grab our chip. So this will be the 3.3. If you actually look at this chip, I really cannot tell if you see it. The last three of the digits say 3.3 on it. That's for 3.3 volts. So for all those doubters wondering what in the heck 3.3 volts means, that's what it means, guys. All right, that is based. Now we're going to tack the remaining 3 pins down. So when I'm doing this, I'm getting the solder on both the pad and the pin, and my goal is to get the solder to flow up the pin a little bit. There we go. You can also set it directly on top of the pin, and the solder will flow down onto the pad. I tend to do whichever is easier in a specific moment. And there we go, the 3.3 voltage regulator is attached. Next, according to the instruction, is mount two 10K resistors. They're the ones labeled with 103. They are in 2 very different locations. So one, and they are marked on the board, they label this entire board, which is great. So 10K, one goes here, the other one goes right here. So the 10Ks are the ones marked 103. So that's this set here. Now we'll end up putting on a total of 3 of these. At the moment we are just starting with 2. They did give us a spare one, really like that. So 1 and 2 go here. The third one will eventually go over here, but we're not dealing with that yet. So we just need 2 of them. We're going to pull them out one at a time though. Let's see if there's any. They don't seem to be directional, but I'm going to solder them the same way they have them in the picture. So sometimes surface mount components are directional, and I'm just very particular about making sure that I get them all correct. So we're going to start down here with the one next to the button switch. So we grab this little guy. Look at the picture behind me. Yes, he is located that way. So the 103 goes from the bottom of the board to the top of the board in the images I have, which means the 1 is by the button and the 3 is up by the 3 volt. Don't really know why they did it that way. They do it actually reverse on the other one, but Considering I don't know if they're directional or not, I tend to prefer to err on the side of caution and say that they are directional. Usually makes everything so much better. Again, we will solder the first pad, and then, oh, I need to get out another resistor. All right, at 103. And this one is 103 with the one at the top near the LCD panel and the 3 at the bottom. So, don't think there's really a reason or if it really matters. I'm just following the instruction images to the letter. Because I like doing that. All right, and then the last side of this 10K. There we go. You really don't end up using very much solder on surface mount components. It's one of the things I really like about surface mount components. All right, after that, I believe we go to the 1K102 resistor, which goes right here. So the 1K102, again, I'm gonna solder the pad. I'm gonna do this before I even get the part out. The 102 is in this little guy, which we also get a spare of this one according to the instruction set. It says we only actually need one of them, but we were given 2. Really appreciate that, Egg Timer. Like, you guys are the best for providing some extra components in case when you're doing this process, one runs away. So flip the resistor over. So again, on this one, they have the one at the top side next to the LCD panel. So I'm going to replicate that. So all right, that one's in place. And now we will do the bottom pad. All right, the bottom pad is done. All right, and next we mount the 0.1 microfarad capacitor. The 0.1 microfarad capacitor, it is the brown in paper tape. So this is our brown in paper tape. The rest have been in plastic tape as far as capacitors go. We have had resistors in paper tape though, so you got to really keep track of what you're doing here. And these 0.1, again, we only need 1, but we're given 2, so huge thanks again, Egg Timer. All right, they said it is not polarized, which I love that. The 0.1 microfarad goes right here. It goes next to this big X tau thing. So if you haven't noticed, I'm very particular about how I put these things together so far. May get less particular as time goes on, but wouldn't count on it. These are not exactly the prettiest solder joints by my standards, but this is the ground station side. I think I'm allowed a few mistakes on the ground station side. Yep, and that's on there. Perfect. After the 0.1 microfarad, I believe they said the resistor was next. 103. Okay, so now we're going over to this 10K resistor. We seem to be working from left to right across the board. This is another 103 resistor. Again, they gave us 4. We only needed 3, so just gonna keep calling them out for being awesome and giving us extra little parts for when one decides to run away. All right, and the 103, they lay it upright, so we're gonna do the same thing. So I'm marking the LCD panel as the top of the board, just to orientate everyone. So I'm actually working on it right side up. For you guys, I think it's upside down. I may have to flip the video for you guys to make sure it is a little easier to follow. We'll see. Not quite sure, but there, that is mounted. So we are now done. Now we are going to mount the Atmega processor. So this processor is going to be fairly particular when being mounted. Sorry about that brief jump scene. I had to replace the battery. So we're going to be soldering on the Atmega processor. So this processor goes right here on the board. We have 28 pins to solder. It's very important we get every pin in its hole. So when we pull the part over, one, we need to get it in the right orientation. So if I pull this guy on screen, you'll notice there's a little divot on one side. This divot matches up with the divot that's been silk screened onto the board. And that's very, very important. And when we remove it from its anti-static little mount, we're now wanting to make sure we get all those little pins into their hole. When we solder, we're going to solder exactly 2 opposite pins to make sure that when we're doing this, we get everything in place on the first try. We don't want to miss anything. Having to unsolder lots of little pins really is not fun. And these are very tight holes. They mention that very specifically, that this is not exactly an easy lineup. I think it will be defined as a fairly tight fit. And you will have to slightly force them in. So this is where this process gets a little hairy. So I'm going to come in and I'm actually going to gently push the pins over. I don't actually like how that went. So we're going to go ahead and just gently pull the whole group of them a little closer over to make them kind of easier to get in. Gently do the same thing. I realize I'm doing this all off screen. I just gently pulled the pins slightly closer together with hopes of making these go in a little easier. I know that sounds kind of sacrilege to do to a PCB board, but let me tell you, that, my friend, is a board I can guarantee is seated. So you look at the other side. On the back side, I can see we have all 28 pins coming through. So what we're actually going to do is we're only going to solder 2 pins like they recommend, and we're going to take our time. We're going to start here with the ground pin. It's usually the square one. Pin connections are actually one thing I know I'm good at soldering, so just check everything real quick. I need to heat that pin up just a smidge more. All right, now we're actually going to go ahead and do the opposite pin like they recommended. Even though I know I've got all 28 pins through, I'm still going to follow the rules. because I'm difficult like that. All right, and I really like the way that looks. So everything is in there. Anytime you see the board go off screen, I just need to get a closer look at it, is all I'm doing. So we're gonna come in here now. And actually, I'm gonna re-tin my tip with some of my spare solder, because I'm not liking how my tip's looking tin-wise. So there we go. That's a lot better. Much shinier tip. Solder does oxidize over time, so. And the number one thing you want to make sure you've got is the little domes. So we'll go ahead and skip through some of this nonsense for everyone. Here we go. Ooh. That board's on. So do a quick check of everything. Couple have some pretty aggressive blobs. And I'm gonna actually reheat this one. I don't like the way that looks. There we go. That's a lot better. As long as they're adhered to the pad, that's fine. When the blob is more up than it is down, you get a little nervous. I'm going to add a little more to this one right here. Got that one a little light. All right, now we flip the board back over, and that's what we've got. So now we're starting with the resonator. So I need to bend the leads on the resonator 90 degrees. I'm actually gonna just take them and trap them between, ooh, doesn't wanna let me. There we go. I'm gonna trap them between here and then just kind of gently bend over and use my tweezers to perform this task, and I'll get a very nice clean bend out of them. Now the resonator goes right here in the XTAL spot. The image shows on their instructions show the label being up, so that's what I'm going to do. They also recommend you take a piece of tape and tape it down. I forgot a piece of tape, so I'll be right back. All I got is painter's tape, so we're gonna have to just make do with that. So we're just gonna quite literally tape right over top of everything to hold it in place. I don't quite like that. So the pins are supposed to stick through, I would imagine, a little more than what they are. We're soldering, oh boy. Forgot I had tinned the tip. We're soldering these three. So I'm not really having to do much work here. I'm just kind of having to cap them, which is really odd. Usually you'd have a little more throughput, and maybe you're supposed to, but where I chose to bend them, that just turned out to not be the case. I'm actually gonna tip back in here from this side, which is a big no-no. I'm just gonna add a little more solder around those joints because they're through hole, it's fine. Usually on through hole you want solder on both sides of the pad holes, which on several of this 28 pin you can actually see it all the way through. So that's about what it should look like, top and bottom. I say about because there seems to be quite a bit of ambiguity within a lot of this. But at the same time, it's very specific. All right, now this one I am very certain we're gonna have to trim. If we don't, I'll be shocked. It's the piezo electric buzzer. Is the next thing on the instructions. So, which I'm not gonna mind having to trim this because these tabs are disgusting. The buzzer is thankfully not polarized. So we just need to place it in there and flip it over. It does say to tape it down with a piece of masking tape. Not gonna do that, doesn't really seem necessary. I'll leave that up to user discretion. I am gonna, however, take a piece of foam from the processor and move it around. And we're gonna get that on there. Get that guy. All right, so nippers. Wow, another tool I didn't actually bring over here with me. Getting a little embarrassing. I went through my full list of tools and still forgot stuff. All right, so we're gonna take the nippers in, gonna cut them off pretty close to where we soldered. This just gets added to our pile of things to be gotten rid of, and that is the buzzer now on there. So, next piece post buzzer is the 10K pot. All right, so the 10K pot is this little guy here. The middle lead would be the guy here. The two over here are the bottom leads. The middle lead goes towards the top of the board, as indicated by the instructions. It's also where the LCD panel label is the top of the board. It's also if you read all the text in one direction, like top and bottom. But set it in there, then we're gonna flip it over and solder it on. This one, thankfully, is kind of spring-loaded, so it actually sticks on there really well. I'm actually gonna tin that and clean it. There's some junk on there I don't like. All right, there we go. A lot better. Regularly tinning and cleaning your soldering iron is how you have very nice and clean joints. Not regularly tinning and cleaning your soldering iron is how you have nasty cold joints. And joints that look cloudy and foggy. So, if you're ever wondering why your joints don't look as good as the ones on the back of the electronics you're tearing apart, tin your soldering iron more. And honestly, it should be done more than what I do. I get pretty lazy sometimes because I'm human and I don't like doing things. Okay, the potentiometer is now on. I don't believe it calls for snipping. Oh, it does say trimmed leads flush. So you don't really need to. There's not much lead left here, but I'm gonna go ahead and trim the leads just like the 32nd of an inch that comes off of them. So the next thing we're doing is this RF board right here. A little nerve-wracking here because they want me to tape the board, tape this guy down. So I'm actually gonna go after the full roll of tape. So we have some to experiment with. because I think we're going to want a big amount of tape. They do mention the fact that if you didn't have any problem doing these voltage regulators, this is going to be very easy. I don't know if I trust that statement, but wait, I did that backwards. It says don't cover the area you're about to work on. That would make more sense. Okay, so we're gonna move this up a little more because I feel like I'm not making this easy to see. Okay, so that is thoroughly held down. I'm actually gonna take some of this excess tape over here because I don't feel like I need it over there. And oh, what way does this thing mount? Goodness, not easy to tell. Apparently there are some holes. That should line up. Well, it goes right here. Anyway. Yeah, it looks like we're gonna want it pretty thin. All right. And it should sit about right there. I don't know how easy that is to see. Not great. So all of these pads on the module line up with the pads on the board. Similarly at the top, that's straight. They're giving me a time constraint on this. So not like a time limit, I need to wait time between each step. So they're telling me to start down here on the bottom right and then move up to the top left for me. So that's what we're gonna do. And I need to wait 30 seconds between every soldering operation to make sure we cool down enough. So, and our goal is to only connect the pads to each other, which I'm not quite sure how that's gonna go. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. Okay, so I don't know if I actually did that counting right. I was kind of just guessing. It's really hard to know if I'm counting enough or not enough. Whew. Okay, so yeah, overheating this thing is very possible. It's the 90% of the time why this module doesn't work is because you overheated this board while soldering. So I'm very much going to give it another 10 count. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I'm going to go ahead and solder this bad boy. And I'm not really sure how I want to get in here at the moment. Which is always great. Now I got a 1. All right, so I've got a timer going for the remaining time just to make sure I don't get too hot, because the next thing we're going on to is actually the RPSMA connector. So RPSMA connector is this little turd. So you notice it has 3 pins and 2 pins. 3 pins top, 2 pins bottom. Pretty simple. So, and then the board slides between the gap in the 2 sets. So we actually line it up so that when we look at it this way, there we go. We got 3 pins lining up with 3 pads on top. And on the bottom, we'll have 2 pins lining up with 2 pads. So the first thing we're going to do is solder exactly 1 pin in place. Right now, we're good to do that. So I'm actually going to start with this little turd over. Oh boy, oh boy. They were not kidding. This is not going to be easy. All right, they recommended I tape it on. I didn't believe them. Well, now it's getting taped on. So again, I'm gonna wait at least a good 10 count here. Mostly because the 2 pins here and here connect to the RF module, and I'm very concerned about hurting anything, and it does recommend waiting the 30 seconds. So give it a good count, and then we'll come back in for the solder. Got it. Okay, start our timer real quick. That connector got hot. Quickly solder that one. Then I'm going to start my 30-second timer. But in this time, we're now moving on to this guy here, which I really like how this has ended up going to be working out. So our whole goal is to get it square to the board. The less square it is, the more issues we are going to have with the alignment of PCB to everything else. All right, that's actually square at the moment. Again, they recommend you solder 1 pin, turn it back over, check if it's 90. If it's not, heat up that pin again. So we will do that real quick. And it looks like I'm going to have that problem. So we're actually going to start with this pin over here. Whoop. That's the other thing. Before you remove your heat, you want to remove your pin. Might be off by 1/2 degree, but I'm going to call that good enough. The taping really helps you try and get it on the first try. And if you know what you're doing, you can do that. So Double check, that's the socket. Yep, not the pins. Pins go on the LCD side itself. All right, that's all. Now, okay, that did get a little hot. Doing 16 in a row there on the edge, that got a little warm. All right, so we're actually now setting this thing aside. Now, to make it even more terrifying, we're doing the soldering on the LCD now. Which, talk about nerve-wracking. The next thing we have are the header pins and the LCD module. On the back of the LCD module, we actually want to insert the short side of the pins into the board. And then again, we're going to want to use tape to square everything up. I'm going to try to get this back in frame as much as I can. It's just not easy to keep this stuff in frame. All right, so we've got that in place. I'm going to solder the first pin up here, then we're going to do the flip over check. I'll remove the tape and we'll solder the remainder. I'm not anticipating any problems with this. All right, check. Or should be about the perfect offset. Oh. Yeah, I forgot there was a little plastic cover on that, but not a big deal. Okay, so now we have that mounted together, that mounted together. They're calling for final assembly in the instructions. Let's do a quick bit check. So these guys go together. And so I'm trying to figure out how I want to solder these pins on. So these pins are used for programming and additional pieces being added on. But I'm not sure if I want to mount them on the front or on the back. Well, it's going to end up floating. I am going to want to mount them on the back of the board, as that is how it will end up being accessible. So, not that this is super visible, this is part of my case, and this board's going to end up mounted about here. So I'm going to have access to the back of these boards whenever I take them apart. So that's how I want to deal with programming. So we are going to solder all of the pins to the back of the board. Just picky about what goes where. 4-pin goes with 4-pin, 3-pin goes with 3-pin. Pretty straightforward on all of that. So I'm going to start with the 4-pin and the 3-pin that are all on one side. That way I can use tape to hold everything in place. And then do all the soldering on the front. Not my favorite thing to have that there, but here we are. All right. So we're going to start down here real quick. I'm pretty much soldering what I can from this side. Ow. This soldering iron's a little light on insulation. I've also been pretty harsh to the soldering iron. This is a new tip that I'm using to make sure I got like the perfect solder on here. And then we'll flip this over real quick. It didn't quite pull through on the back. Actually did on quite a few of them, so we're gonna call that good. Then our last 3 pin goes over here. And we'll use a quick bit of tape again to just quickly hold it down. And then we'll come in and solder it on. So the other thing is I'm going to end up adding a couple of add-ons to this. So these aren't necessary for everything. Honestly, I could have left the aux one off. I wanted to mount it because I have it to mount. This is our programming. This is the one I'm going to be using with the GPS module. I'll probably make in the next video, considering it needs to mount in this case. So the next thing we need to do is we need to also mount wires for the battery and the switch and some of that stuff. To solder on goes on the button pads down here. So I'm trying to get the wires all prepped. So what I'm actually doing right now is twisting the wires to make it all go together easier. It's an old trick. And so I want to actually have the button protruding from, or the wires protruding from the back of the board on everything. So we protrude them from the back, have them from the front here. Come on in with the soldering iron. Give her a go. I don't like that. Soldering iron's getting a little dirty. Only downside of braided wires, it doesn't solder great. There we go, got it to take. That wire's gonna be a little warm. All right, there we go. Now what we're also gonna wanna do is take our nippers and trim these off. And that leaves us with very clean wires on the back. So we also have battery and switch. I'm not 100% certain what my battery is going to be, but I am pretty certain about what my switch is going to be. So I've got some of this wire here. I'm going to cut, oh heck, I don't know what this is. Thankfully these are 1-inch squares. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 6 to 7 inches. I'm going to separate back about 1 inch on either side and strip about half of that with my wire strippers, mostly just to give myself a lot to work with. There's really no reason to need to strip this much. I'm just trying to make my life as absolutely easy as I possibly can. So we're gonna just kind of put those there. So I went ahead and off screen connected all the wires to where they go, just because I was trying to figure out how to get this thing to work. I've also got a temporary solution for a battery with a 9-volt. I am going to be integrating this into a LiPo, probably be a 2S LiPo, trying to find the biggest one I can to power everything off one LiPo that I'm going to have running here. Was hoping to run it off a battery pack, but this guy needs 6 volts, not 5.5, so I'm gonna have to use a LiPo for that. Not a big deal, but just good to know. So our next thing is we're gonna mount this in here real quick. I have technically already programmed the Eggfinder LCD. I will show you how to do that in another video at some point. Woo! Hello. That is kind of in the way. It is not quite as easy as I had hoped it would be to get the whole thing mounted up. I'm also probably using about twice as many nuts as what the designer recommended, but I also don't care because I want this thing on there like it's on standoffs. So I'm going to attach every screw head to roughly its spot. And I'm just gonna start with the top two real quick here. I just realized this one's longer. I must have grabbed some that were the wrong length. That is 1.5 inches. Not the same length as that one? It is. This one must be 1.25 inches. It is 1.5 inches, right? Yeah, 1.5 inches. I believe. Oh, my instructions said I needed 1.5 inches. So this one is actually too short. Not a big deal. I bought extra screws in case I grabbed the wrong one out of a bin, like what I apparently did. So I plan for this contingency. I also have a large series of nuts in various brass versus steel because it was all I could find at the store while I was there. I wasn't getting too picky on a lot of things. I just wanted something that would roughly work. Woo! Hello here. I am also trying to see if I can get a nut in here. Okay, I can. I'm kind of wanting to make sure that I stand everything off in its proper way. I don't want things being able to float. I think it was meant to sit down in here a little farther, or down inside the box a little farther by the design, and not meant to have any of these extra bits on there, but I'm gonna have these extra bits on there because I like it personally. So the whole goal here is to get the LCD pressed right up against. All right. So now the LCD is held on there. I just really want to make sure everything stays in place. If the board starts moving on me while I'm using it, it's not going to be very useful, in my opinion. While I really like this box, I can tell this was kind of a first pass by the guy who designed it. I've already modified way large amounts of this. And I'll post a link to what this actually is in the description, just so all of you can have it if you want it. It's definitely not going to be something that's like required. Some people would prefer a different kind of case to the one I'm messing around with. I very much will understand user preference, because I found this because it gave me the chance to hide either two of these in there, or it gave me the chance, as I'm using it, to hide my T3 from MissileWorks in here. All right. So I want to make sure I get as much of this switch stuff contained as I can. Some of it's just going to be loose and extra for the moment. But so that's the rough mounting of this. The box is back off by itself. So then this whole thing smushes down inside here in a very rough and not as pretty as I would like way. And seats in there, and that gives us that. The screws on the back don't quite stick through as far as I think they should, but I may have to mess with how that's done. So we will see about that. As for now, that's how that all mounts inside this LCD case. We're not going to finish the LCD case until we have the GPS module that would mount right down here in this case. And I will show you full programming of the LCD module now that I understand how it works. You get this cable from Eggfinder, and they're very clear on how this plugs in to your programming pins on the back here, which there's 4 pins here. They're your programming pins. You go black, white, green down, so ground, TX, and RXD. Plug it in there. This will show up on a COM port. And then there's very clear instructions. It's very weird on how they program these boards. But it did work, and I will show you real quick when I turn it on what that looks like. So when I plug in a 9-volt battery, I flip it over. As soon as I turn it on, it beeps. We get Eggfinder LCD version 2.03G, which is exactly what I uploaded to it. I've got 8.9 volts on there, and then it goes into a finding signal mode. Should anytime here now. Yep, waiting for TRS. So now it's waiting for the tracker that we haven't built yet. But that is how that works, turning it on and off. In the next video, we will be doing the GPS board for this base station. And then we will move on to the mini tracker itself before doing a final video all about how this thing assembles and integrates. And we'll go to test it by tracking probably my wife running around the field. It'll be pretty interesting. But thanks for watching, gang. I hope you enjoyed the video on how to put together your Eggfinder LCD display. The next video will be the Eggfinder GPS. So I'll see y'all next video.